Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or seeking to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as clinical psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. Richard, good morning.
Day three.
Today we're going to talk about, more about normal and what is normal and what is not normal. But we're going to take it from the perspective of what we're doing to ourselves that may be sort of contributing to some of the things that we're referring to as problems.
That's right. This week, we're devoting this week to a discussion of, is it really a mental illness or not? Or is it just normal behavior? Right. There's in the world of addictions, there's a whole notion of, well, everybody's addicted to something. And no, everybody's not addicted. Right. I may like to have a bowl of ice cream every night after dinner, but that doesn't make me an addict.
Sure.
I may have little routines. How many days a week do you play soccer?
3 or 4.
Same day?
Most days.
Same time?
Pretty much.
Does that make you an addict?
Maybe.
No.
I get shakes. I get shakes if I don't go play.
It's 5 o'clock on Wednesday. No, and you're not an addict.
Right.
Or you don't have OCD because you schedule yourself. Right. Okay. So, and today we're going to talk about a prevalent mental disorder. It affects 20% of us any particular day. Probably 20% of Americans are struggling with what we would call, really are struggling with depression. Sure. Right? So it's a very prevalent diagnosis. But even in this case, it may not really be depression. It may be something about the way you're living your life that is creating the symptoms of depression, but you really don't have it. Another way to look at it is, there is a chemical imbalance. And I think you've done a lot of work with postpartum depression. Right. And that's clearly seen as a chemical imbalance, a hormonal imbalance, because of the effects of childbirth on the hormone system. And so clearly that's a chemical imbalance. And there may be other cases of chemical imbalance. But in some cases, it's not really a chemical imbalance. It's something about the way you're living your life that is producing similar symptoms. And we have to be very careful. What we've been talking about all week is, as clinicians, we have this responsibility to make a very thorough diagnosis because the symptoms, 2 people may present with the same symptoms, but only one may have the disorder.
And so we are talking very specifically about depression today. And this there was an article written in Psychology Today called entitled "Do You Contribute to Your Own Depression?" Written by Dr. Jerry Hessler.
I think it's Hessler or Heisler.
Heisler. E.I.
E.I. Heisler.
But we're going to talk about it from the perspective of, as you said, what do we do? What conscious decisions are we making? What are we doing voluntarily that may be contributing to these depressive symptoms or these experiences that we're having that are causing depressive symptoms?
That's right.
And it's important that we talk about this because, as has sort of been the routine that we've talked about in all the podcasts this week, is that we want to say, oh, well, we're experiencing this because we have depression, because that is, for some reason, more acceptable than to say, well, you're doing this, and because you're doing this, it's causing your depression.
Right. A classic chicken and egg argument. Right. Am I doing something that's making me depressed? Right. Or am I depressed and therefore doing these things? Right. That's the clinician's conundrum. Right. But that's our obligation. That's what we should be trained to make those distinctions and not say, well, it's chicken or egg, I'm not sure. Right. No, you have to be sure.
Right. Right. And so, well, I guess maybe we could talk about a couple of things that we do voluntarily that can create some depressive symptoms.
What are these things?
Right.
And the contribution of this article is he lists very specific things that we do that could contribute to a psychological depression.
Right. So there's one of the things that we do is we're very critical of ourselves. We look at ourselves and we evaluate ourselves and we oftentimes evaluate ourselves through a very harsh lens.
Right.
And so when we're so critical of ourselves, when we're too critical of ourselves, instead of producing positive change, we create impairing limitations.
Right.
And so that's something we have to really work to address.
Right. The first, we tend to be self-critical. I would guess that as much as I think more people are probably self-critical than they are of being confident.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I think if you looked at a population of 100 people,
Yeah.
Many more would be self-critical. Okay. And the problem with being self-critical is that you tend to seek comfort in other things. In other words, I can't do it. I'm not worth it. I'm sad. I can't achieve. I can't do this. I can't do that. So I'm going to get my comfort in other things. And those things are drugs, alcohol, food. You go to other places to get some comfort. Instead of getting your comfort from accomplishment, you settle on, I'm not good at anything, so I'm just going to make myself feel better with these things.
Right.
Okay. And that's one contribution.
Right. The second one is being too judgmental.
Of
others.
Of
others.
Right.
And being too judgmental of ourselves is that sort of that same too critical.
Right.
So this is sort of projecting it outwards. We're being too judgmental of others.
That's right. And he has this wonderful phrase throughout this article called the anger reservoir.
Yeah.
And he says one of the ways we fill up the anger reservoir is when we're judgmental. We're critical of ourselves, and we're critical of others. And do you know anybody who's like that? I know some people. I mean, they're always criticizing everybody else. And when you criticize other people, and you feel affected by them, you get angry. Yeah. And he said, over time, you fill up your anger reservoir, and the anger reservoir will burst at some point. Yeah. It's like a dam with too much water in it. It will burst at some point. But as you fill up with anger, you start to experience the symptoms of depression. Right. But it's not depression. Yeah. It's something else.
It's anger reservoir.
Anger reservoir.
Yes. Now, number 3 is that sometimes our expectations are just too high.
Right. That's right.
And you don't hear people say that, I think, often enough.
Right. Well, I know what the problem is.
Yeah, you just have too high of expectations. Right. But we're not talking about not challenging yourself or setting ambitious goals. What we're talking about is you can't go, to use an example that we've used before, you can't go from making D's and F's in high school to making all A's in college and going to medical school. Right. The likelihood of that is so small that to set that as a goal may be too ambitious.
And you and I have both seen it. We'll have students who will come in, they're getting C's and D's. And what do you want to do when you get out of school? I want to be a veterinarian. It's harder to get into veterinary school than medical school. Right. So the chances of you getting there are pretty slim.
Right.
We also have to learn how to manage our expectations. Right. What do I expect? You have to have realistic expectations, but then you have to manage those expectations. Right. And you can't get mad at others for not meeting your expectations. Right. You can have high expectations, but don't get angry with people if they don't meet your expectations.
Right. And if you are making C's and D's and you want to go to veterinary school, instead of making the goal to go to veterinary school, let's make the goal of making B's and C's, and then make the goal of making A's and B's, and just work up from there.
I just thought of something. It's not funny. I'm sorry.
What?
Managing your expectations. If you're married and you're in your 50s and your wife is going through menopause, you better change. If you want to survive the next 10 years, you better manage your expectations. You're not going to touch that one, right?
Number 4.
It's true, isn't it? It's true. Or your spouse gets sick. You got to manage your expectations. Or you have a baby come into the family. Your expectations. You need to manage your expectations. But I see a lot of people struggling, men and women struggling with menopause. A woman also has to manage her expectations because guys don't tune into that stuff as well as we want them to. Okay, you're not going to touch that one, are you? Come on.
Number 4.
Be brave, Berney. Come on. Be courageous.
You know what? That's too high of expectations for me. So number 4 is that is we don't have enough gratitude for what we have and for where we are and what
Absolutely.
we're already doing.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that I have certainly met with a lot of people who are doing wonderful things, like spectacular things, but you know, I'm not doing more.
Right.
So, or I don't have more, or I don't have availability to do more, and so they become, you know, that they have that poor attitude of gratitude.
He mentions in the article the soldiers' good day. You know, a good day is one in which you're not being shot at.
Right.
You know. But I also think that Carl Reiner and Norman Lear and Dick Van Dyke, they're all in their 90s, and they just produced a new play or movie or something. And the title of it is, First I Read the Obituaries, and if I don't see my name, I have breakfast. And what a, you know, that's managing your expectations. Yeah. But that's a good, I'm grateful for what I have.
Right.
You know, Ronald Reagan said one time, it's better than the, you know, about his age, and he said, better than the alternative.
Right.
So, okay, this side of the grass. We want to be on this side of the grass, right?
There's all kinds of little funny things. Number 5 is we don't look for solutions. We're only focusing on the problem. We did a whole podcast on this a couple months ago, I think. But we're focused so much on the problems that we're not looking for solutions.
Right. Yeah. Go out and fix it.
Yeah.
You know, go out and do something to make things better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And the last one is we're not forgiving. And again, we did a podcast not too long on this, why we have such a difficult time forgiving. But, you know, when we hold on to that, hold on to that psychological distress, it's going to make us depressed.
That's right. These last two, when we don't look for solutions, that fills up the anger reservoir. And this last one about forgiveness, you have to learn. I know it's hard, but you have to learn how to forgive. There's a wonderful phrase from China, maybe Confucius, who said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You can't hold on to this. I mean, I know it almost feels good to be angry sometimes.
Right.
You know, I want to be angry. I want to hate this person. But it is really self-destructive.
Right.
And because you fill up your anger reservoir. You know, once another way to add to your anger reservoir.
Absolutely.
And you shouldn't do that. What's this topic about? Creating your own depression.
Right.
These are 6 ways, and this last one, it's as important as the other 5.
Right.
You know, don't do this to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, is that it?
Very good.
Yeah, we could add more.
I was a little
to the
disappointed
list.
You didn't come out on the limb with me on that menopause.
Why?
Why?
There were 2 things, but there are other things that we could add to this list because there's, you know, when we're not exercising, lifestyle things that we're choosing to do, we're choosing not to do that contribute to depression. So,
isn't that true? You know, our diet.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate the word diet. What we eat. You know, we refuse to give up things that we know are making us unhealthy.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
That's number 7.
Yep.
Number 8 is you don't sleep well because you'd rather be on your iPad. We could go on and
Number
on.
9 is you're not exercising.
We could make our own list.
We should.
All right.
We should make a little infographic that we could put out there.
We should do a list like this for teenagers because they do this all the time because they're still learning how to do these things.
Yeah. It wouldn't just be for teenagers though. It could be for everybody.
But that would be the audience.
Yeah.
You know, teenagers struggle with this kind of thing.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right. So that's all for this time. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, forget to be afraid.